Jessica, or are you? Hi, good evening. We wanted to welcome everyone to our second webinar with Lexi Finnegan, Captioning for Teens with Hearing Loss, as part of our Cochlear Implant Connections for Teens web series. So tonight we'll be on for about an hour. Lexi is going to start talking about her captioning experience, and then ACI Alliance Executive Director Donna Sorkin is going to come on and talk a little bit about access and captioning and what you are entitled to and how to make sure that you know what you're entitled to and how to get it. And then we're hoping to have some great questions and time for discussion at the end of the webinar. So thanks again for joining us, and I will turn it over to Lexi. Thanks so much, Lexi.
Hello, I'm Lexi Finnegan, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our second Cochlear Implant Connections for Teens webinar. I'm so thankful for the American Cochlear Implant Alliance for their support with this webinar. I am 16 years old and a junior in high school. I have been profoundly deaf from a very young age. I have had bilateral cochlear implants since I was 3 years old. I was born in China, and at 2.5 years old, I was adopted by my parents. One thing that I love to do is playing golf. Actually, I just completed my golf season last week. It was a blast. Living in the tropical climate of Florida is a bit rough during this time since it is so hot. Thankfully, the autumn weather is starting to come in. I would love to hear where everyone is from. Could you please enter your state in the chat? Okay, so we're gonna move on. Today's topic is captioning for teens with hearing loss. I will be discussing captioning in the classroom, captioning in everyday life, and fun facts. At the end of the slideshow, I will put up a slide of a similar survey to last time about what topics you all would like to discuss in future webinars. For instance, there is a lot of interest on captioning apps and what situations I use captions. So just to know you all a little bit, I just want to see if you all find captioning helpful. Do you typically watch TV, movies with subtitles or closed captions on? And usually I use captions all the time throughout my life, especially on Instagram Reels. Okay, so what is captioning to me? So I use captioning as a resource for me to utilize on social media platforms, classroom educational settings, TV streaming platforms, and of course, virtual meeting platforms as a deaf person who is a cochlear implant user. Captioning in the classroom. In elementary school, I would say that I did not really know of closed captioning and what it was. Hopefully, you have a teacher of the deaf because when I was in elementary school, the school could not staff me with one. Instead, at a younger age, I had to rely on my parents and teachers to be the advocates. So I want to give a shout out to my first grade teacher, Miss Fraga. Florida is a state that is notorious for having a lot of state assessments. It seems like we are always being tested. She noticed that one of my assessments had become digitalized, and some of the directions were only audio based. She had to submit a request for the district to get directions captioned for me in order for me to really understand. Interestingly enough, I wasn't even invited to my own IEPs while in elementary school. So for middle school, when I did not realize closed captioning was going to be a big part of my life. However, when COVID-19 struck, everything became digital. Everyone had their mouths covered. Life as a deaf teen became so much harder. Even though I do have bilateral cochlear implants, I still rely on lip reading just to make sure I fully understand what a person may be saying. With that resources taken away from me, my comprehension skills drastically decrease, especially with all of my classes online in the 6th grade. Oftentimes, the audio did not match the teacher's lips. I can honestly say that one positive thing that came out of COVID-19 pandemic was that it really made me utilize some resources that I did not realize could be so beneficial, such as closed captions. So one day, when I was using my school's virtual meeting platform, I saw the words closed captions on the bottom. I clicked it and tried it for a few days of virtual school, and it was life-changing. My life became so much easier since I didn't have to solely rely on a glitchy screen and audio. I remember how back in the day, I feel old now saying that, the closed captions were not the most accurate, but it definitely did help, and the technology has improved and continues to evolve. Near the end of the sixth grade, masks were still a thing, but I was a back in school person. I couldn't use my virtual meeting captioning resource anymore. My teachers knew that I struggled in class a bit since I couldn't lip read anymore and began wearing clear masks. I'm so thankful for them taking the time and resources to find and purchase these amazing masks. Here's a photo that I found online that's very similar to the masks that my teachers use. You can see with the clear plastic, I was able to read their lips while also, social distancing and keeping myself safe from COVID at the time. So I'd say around seventh grade, I had a meeting with my teacher of the deaf. They are an advisor that you would meet once a month to talk about accommodations and more. And what she did, she told me of this thing called live captioning, in which the computer will transcribe the teacher's voice in real time. It sounded so cool. It would help me even more during this hard time in school. I did have to get permission from my teachers to use my computer during their lectures in order to have it captioned for me. Eventually, at the next IEP meeting, I added the permission or accommodation of me using a computer or a mobile device to caption the teacher whenever I needed it. I would definitely recommend you all to add that sort of accommodation at your next meeting, since it is definitely nice to have available. It really makes sure you understand the material. In addition, those educational YouTube videos the teacher would play in class? For me, it was simply impossible to understand a single word the video was saying. And I've experienced way too many times to count. So I would always ask the teacher to put the closed captions on, and thankfully they were always friendly. And sometimes I would have some students in my or classmates that would also want it on. Sometimes I didn't even have to ask for it. So in high school, as life started to transition away from the effects of COVID-19, including wearing masks and virtual meetings, life started to go back to the way it was. I didn't have to use my live captionings as much anymore since masks weren't a really big thing anymore. I was able to read the teacher's lips again. So awesome. And life was just easier. Nowadays, when I am in class, sometimes I am concentrating so much on listening to the teacher, so captioning helps make sure that I hear everything correctly. In addition, I don't miss out on important information. I also have to write notes while doing that, so I would often struggle. Instead of multitasking, I would use my closed captioning accommodation to caption the teacher in their lecture so that I can write notes on it later, and in the moment, I'll be paying attention to the teacher. This was the time when I really started to advocate for myself and talking to the teachers one-on-one whenever I needed assistance regarding my accommodations. One time we had a video and I'll be like, hey, teach, would you be able to put up closed captions? Or I would be, hey, is it okay if I could use my computer or my cell phone to be able to close caption your lecture? So, and usually they're very friendly. They're always happy to do it. And then does anyone have any questions about, the topics I just discussed? Feel free to message in the chat, and I'll give you all a couple of seconds. If you had known about captioning while you were in elementary school, do you think it would have been useful? Well, I definitely would have, but I'm young. I didn't really think it was really helpful. But of course, I'm young, I'm stubborn, and I'm just don't want to listen to my parents. But now, especially with COVID really facilitated me to really understand what was at stake and how captions could be so useful in my life. So maybe if COVID, if COVID, I think COVID was just a really big thing. I wouldn't probably not be using captions as much if it wasn't for COVID-19. Okay, so we'll move on to captioning in everyday life. So I attended summer camps at an engineering level. And basically, before I started the camp, we had this little form sent out if I wanted to let the counselors know of any accommodations or anything that I needed. And I said, hey, I will be using my phone in order to help caption the professor's lectures. And I installed a captioning app on my phone and my computer to be able to transcribe the lectures. It definitely was really helpful and partially life-changing, I would say, in this context, because the professor said many terms and criteria that I did not fully understand since this was a new material. So with the closed captions in hand, I was able to conduct my own research later on and help make sure I understand everything. And then the next day I felt prepared. Some of the professors also had accents, and accents, oh, my worst nightmare, just because, it's so hard to really understand what a person is saying since it's already hard enough as a deaf teenager with cochlear implants and then accents on top of it. It's just captioning definitely helped a little bit with that. And then watching on any platform. So I'm pretty sure you all know that there are an abundance of resources available for captioning on streaming platforms. For example, me and my parents watch The British Baking Show, which is awesome. I highly recommend. And of course, all the cast members have British accents. Oftentimes, I'm able to understand it, but of course, it's an accent. I'm not always able to fully understand what's happening, so having that captions up definitely helps me enjoy the show and not miss anything. And there's a show that me and my mom loved watching with captions was Hamilton. And we always talk about how there's such vast parts in the show, and without the captions, we would be missing such a huge part of the narrative. So I definitely think captioning is just really great to have with TV shows, musicals, anything really. And then, so I wanted to include some true or false. And, I want to see if you guys could be a little bit, into it and see if you guys have any guesses. So, our first one, true or false? Older adults use closed captioning more than younger adults. Please enter your guesses in the chat. I want to see what y'all think. Okay, so we got false, true, false. Okay. Well, I'm sorry to those who said true. It is actually false. So, a poll last month from the Associated Press found that people under the age of 45 are more likely to use captions than older adults. And those 16 older were more likely to say that they've never ever used captions. It's really interesting to see the different mindset about captioning within the ages. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next one. So number 2, the trend of Gen Alpha, Gen Z, and millennials using captions is called the TikTok effect. I will give you guys a couple of seconds to enter your guesses in the chat. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3 trues and 1 false. Okay, well, it is true. So, according to Civic Science, a survey conducted last year Those who use TikTok were far more likely to use subtitles or closed captioning when streaming because a lot of TikTok videos are captioned and users really like it. Okay, so we're gonna move on to number 3. Students without disabilities use captioning as much as students with disabilities. Please enter your answers in the chat. Okay, so we have a pretty mixed, I see quite a bit of false, some true. So it is true. I was very surprised about this because I did not expect it. So a 2015 study conducted by Oregon State University found that students without disabilities use captions almost as frequently as students with disabilities. I guess captioning is cool now. Okay, so we're gonna move on to number 4. Oh dear. Okay, number 4. Okay, true or false? Young people use captions because they are secretly watching TikTok when they should be sleeping. I'll give you guys a couple of seconds. Okay, so we got a lot of truths, I see. Okay, so this is partially correct because I found this really neat chart from this thing from the Associated Press, and about 10% of people do use captioning to watch the sound off. Don't get any ideas, kids. You should not be staying up late to watch TikTok. But I found this chart really neat because you could get to see over 50% use captions to catch every word, which I found it so cool. And in addition, the study even included the percentage of subtitles used among people with hearing issue right here and hearing impairment. So I think this is such a really neat chart, and it's just so interesting the information that it has. I definitely was very surprised. Okay, so I thought I would get you guys a little excited about capturing being integrated in our lives. And what do we have in store in the near future? So AI live captioning, I'm pretty sure you all have a pretty good idea about, but it is pretty much used in every single live captioning program available to us. Although AI captioning is very advanced for our time, it still has a few tweaks that could be done. The downsides of AI captioning is accents, speaking too fast, and multiple people speaking at the same time. But it's really still advanced even though there are those downsides. And I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this technology related to captioning with glasses. So basically, it is glasses that automatically caption speech, which you can see the text through your glasses. I put an image here to give you a somewhat better understanding as to what I'm saying. So you see the green words on the glasses, that's where you would see the captions. And although this idea is still in the works, it's just so amazing how advanced this technology is, and just really seeing people coming up with these innovative ideas. And as you know, calling someone is not the easiest, especially for me since I lip read a lot. I remember when back in the day, I'm acting like I'm old again, but my cochlear implants did not have Bluetooth and it did not connect to my phone. So having to listen to people speak on the phone always went terribly since it was so hard for me to understand. Sometimes I would have my mom with me to sort of be the translator so that I could understand what the person is saying because it was so hard for me. Um, With Bluetooth now, I love having the phone directly connect to my cochlear implants, and it really does help. But it's still pretty difficult, I'd personally say, with understanding the other person. When I went to the American Cochlear Implant Alliance conference in Boston this past year, I was introduced to various programs which will caption when you're on the phone. I was so fascinated, and it is such an amazing innovation. If you are interested, I would definitely message Laura in the chat to ask for more information. I hope this gave you all a little bit of hope for what is in store for us in the future regarding captioning. So if you have any questions, just let me know and I'll give you guys a couple of seconds. So, for those who are watching, it would be great if you could scan this QR code and it's a very similar survey to last time just to gather more feedback and learn more about what you all want to see in future webinars. And after Miss Donna's presentation is going to be coming up, we will stop the recording and start a discussion. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to be here, and I really appreciate it. So now I will hand this over to Donna, the Executive Director of American Cochlear Implant Alliance. I'm just gonna.
Lexi, thank you so much. That was fantastic. You really um, put your own teen perspective on how you're using captioning, and I loved hearing about it. I'm just going to add a few examples of some captioning options that actually are required under the ADA that you may not have thought about. And I'm not going to talk too long. And Lexi, you could go to the next slide. And one of the things that I don't think you can see the top there, but maybe other people can. Um, Captioning is one example of universal design. And when I first started working in this field, it was right after the Americans with Disabilities Act was implemented, which was passed in 1990. And one of the arguments that we made about these kinds of accommodations are that providing curb cuts um, actually help everyone, including the person who's looking for it. And you brought that out beautifully when you talked about students without disabilities are using captions as much as students with disabilities. And a lot of these examples are really true that people who are seeking them because they have hearing loss are actually benefiting everybody. So I'm going to just talk a minute about the caption telephone, which Lexi already brought up, captioning at the movies and at the theater. And you can go to the next slide. And I just love this look at young people who are looking at their phones and of course, we hope that you're using the phone to do more than text. But it seems like a lot of times everybody's using their phone to text. And you could go to the next slide, but there are going to be times when you need to make a phone call. And Lexi, you brought up the fact that sometimes you have difficulty, as all of us with hearing loss do. And the picture that I have up there is the old style caption telephones, which probably you all don't want to use. You want to use a cell phone version of captioning, and that now is available. Lexi saw it in the exhibit hall at our conference. This kind of captioning with telephones was a requirement under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we do all pay a few cents when we pay our phone bill, and that goes towards the provision of caption telephones. So there are now free cell phone captioning options, and they use a mobile app from companies like Hamilton CapTel or Caption Call. Those are the two I'm familiar with, and they provide real-time captions for mobiles. And they work with your existing smartphone and provide captions for voicemail as well. So that's a really important benefit. So you do need a cell phone, your own cell phone, and a Wi-Fi or mobile data connection. And then you download the app from the service, which is free. So it's a really important benefit for you to have, because there may be times, even if you're really good on the phone, and I am, there are times when I need a little help on the phone. Lexi mentioned that her mom helps her sometimes. So that will be a really important option for you to have. Okay, you can go to the next slide, which is captioning at the movies. And when we first were getting the ADA implemented, we tried to get movie theaters to promise to caption, and we could get that passed. It was an important lobby. And so most of us now, years later after the ADA was passed, we stream at home. All of us do. That's mostly what we do when we want to watch a movie. But going to a movie theater is special. And sometimes the blockbusters don't come out for a while. Um, and open captioning on the screen is what most of us prefer. But as I noted, ADA didn't mandate open captioning of films, but they encourage special showing. So if you look at in your own area and Google open captioning at the movies in your town, you might find examples of shows that are being open captioned with times. And I did that recently, and I saw where I live in the Washington area, there were actually a number of open captioned options that were available. The other option is movie theaters that have closed captioning. And these may be available most of the time. And I'll show you an example of one of those. Lexi, if you go to the next slide. This is called reflective captioning, this particular one, and then they use it at one of the movie theaters that I go to sometimes. And basically what it is, that man's sitting with a screen in front of him. It's almost like a mirror, and he is picking up the captions that are being sent from the back of the room on a light emitting diode, and you can arrange that screen to pick up those captions. And meanwhile, the film is being portrayed by that smiley face there. That's the screen. And those actually work pretty well. And I've used them at theaters. The thing about it is if the theater has it, you can use it anytime. And you don't have to wait for a special caption showing. And those were one of the ways that we argued that movie theaters should be able to make their showings accessible to people. So those closed captions may be available in theaters, and just check them out. That's another way to find captions. Lexi, if you go to the last slide, that one's captioning at the theater. And many theaters offer captioning of 2 or 3 shows per a show run. And some offer captioning at your seat, often on a pad, but always upon request, depending upon where you live, sometimes all the time. So, some examples of where I live, where I can find captioning, is the Folger Shakespeare Theater, which open captions two shows. And those are really nice. They're from the ceiling on the stage. And with Shakespeare, wow, some people have trouble following the dialogue, whether they have hearing loss or not. So I find when they're doing those open caption showings that a lot of people are watching the captions. So another example of universal design really helping other people. The Kennedy Center has open captions on the stage, usually on one side or the right or the left, in a captioning box, and they do that 2 to 3 times per run. And those are kind of nice, and I use those quite frequently. And then the other thing that the Kennedy Center will do, which is really amazing, with notice, they'll caption on a pad at your seat for any show. And you just have to ask them about 2 weeks' notice after you buy your ticket. They will caption a show for you, and that's how they are making their theater accessible. And then another theater I go to is the Arena Stage, and they have captions at every show on a pad at your seat. So you have to just stop by and pick up a pad when you arrive at the theater, and then you can just have the captions as you watch the show. So, those are some examples that you may not know of that I thought I would share with you. And if you have any questions about these, please put your questions in the chat. Lexi, there's a question for you in the chat.
Um, so, um, my teachers and their comfortableness with captioning technology, or if I have to teach them about it. So oftentimes I am not the ones who, have, well, actually, let me say this. So usually I'll have a phone or a device, a personal phone or device. I'll let them know, hey, I'm going to be captioning in which I control and I kind of turn on the microphone for my phone in which it will caption and I turn it off. The teachers don't have to do a single thing. And in addition, the only thing that I really have to teach them in terms of captioning technology is how to turn on closed captions on YouTube. But that's pretty much it. It's pretty self-sufficient for myself.
It doesn't look like there's any questions for me. So, Lexi, I think you should take the show on and create some discussion on captioning.
Yeah.
Lexi, you mentioned in one of your slides about summer camp and just non-school captioning. Were there other places that you found it kind of useful besides that?
Um, in terms of everyday life, I'm with very forgivable people, so they're always like, if I mishear something, I'm like, hey, can you repeat this? They're always like, oh, no problem. Usually I don't have a problem in terms of my family or friends, but one time I used FaceTime back in I don't really use it a lot nowadays just because I'm in person all the time and it is helpful to have captioning, but if it's, a regular conversation with my friends, it can be, I would say, just smidge awkward in terms of just having a phone in front of your face, and then your friends are like, "Hey, Lexi, are you gonna be looking at me?" And oftentimes I'm lip reading, so I can't look at two things at the same time, and usually lip reading tends to be a bit more sufficient in terms of my own comprehension.
It's funny you brought up phones. Alex, I see that you're on here as well. And I was wondering because I know a lot of schools are going against having phones during the day. but I don't know if that's part of IEPs. And Alex, I don't know if you wanted to chime in, or Lexi, if you had experience, but I know with some schools going in that way, phones are just a lifeline in schools for some kids with hearing loss.
Want me to go? Okay. Yes, especially here in Florida, and I'm sure Lexi's experienced a little bit of that. We've been adding phones for quite a while now because of the capability. I'm so sorry, I'm not camera ready, like by any means. Um, we've been adding phones now to IEPs probably for the last 2 years. First, it started with because of the accessibility of cochlear implants and being able to adjust your implants in the programming. So the phone thing has been going on for a while, but now it's a very deliberate effort. There's a deliberate language to add to IEPs to ensure that these kids, if they are captioning or they're using live talk or they're using live caption, have that access to their phone. And it's also very deliberate in because some teachers who don't understand captioning assume that they're being recorded. So they assume that sometimes live captioning implies recording, especially now given AI. So there's some very deliberate language that at least my team and some other teams have been using to ensure that teachers are reassured that what's happening is not captioning, is captioning and not recording. But there's also very deliberate language to make sure that the phone or the computer or even a tablet can be used for that accessibility. I don't know if that's hit Lexi yet as far as the phone and stuff like that. They've probably been putting it on her IEP for a while.
Yes, I had it added, I believe, in 8th grade or 7th grade, just near the beginning when I was with my teacher of the deaf. I was like, hey, can I add this accommodation? Because, it's always nice to have that security. I always recommend just get the accommodation in there because it's so much harder to add accommodations, and the school will be happy to, you know, take off those accommodations that you don't look like you're using, but they could be helpful in the future and you don't even know it.
There's a question in the chat that kind of relates that says, asks if you have a favorite captioning app for school.
I do not particularly. I always choose the free ones because, um, but I definitely know Laura has a lot of resources available. And if you look on ACI Line's website, I even searched up captions, it showed up some resources as well. If you look on the website and go into the search bar.
And anyone who can't find it on our website, if you email info@acialliance.org, we can find the resource if we don't have it readily available. When you're kind of looking ahead towards the end of high school and maybe into college, do you think how you use captions will change at school? Or is it just kind of hard to tell because the technology changes so fast?
I think I will definitely be using it a lot more just because I view high school as more, you have a more individualized relationship with your teacher. So if you miss class, if you miss a lecture, it's pretty easy to catch up. However, with college, based on what I've heard, it can be a little bit, you either go to class or you don't. So that if you don't go to class, you can kind of miss a lot, especially with the lectures. But there's always makeup lectures. And a plus, I am considering going to engineering, which is a very, very hard topic to get into, especially with the various very heavy material, and it's very easy to get behind. So I would definitely be using captioning a lot more just to understand maybe vocabulary terms that I'm still learning or any of that. And I would definitely use, that brings me up to technology. I would totally love to use, I heard they have this pen microphone that some kids are using in university to help with hearing since the lecture halls are like 300 students in one room with a professor. So I definitely, it's just, I'm really excited to see if there how technology expands when I'm starting to get into high school because a lot can happen in 2 years.
Mhm.
Lexi, I have a question for you. Do you have any preference of automatic captions, like if we're using captions right now on Zoom versus cart captioning, where there's a real live person who's captioning what speakers are saying?
I think it's really dependent on timing versus accuracy because obviously the person is going to be much more accurate, but there's always that slight delay. And that can be very hard for some people, just experiencing the speaking versus the captions are in different times, especially with the sound mouth are matched, but then the captions are not. So that can be something that, especially I remember when I was in a doctor room and I was looking at the news and remember seeing the live captions by a person, but it definitely was a bit confusing just for my mind to be able to experience that. So in my personal experience with the way I am, I like to have it, although it may not be the most accurate, I can use context clues to match up the information with the not the what did you call it again?
Mhm.
What
And
was the other captioning that you called the versus the person captioning and then the
Cart. Cart captioning is when a real person's doing it. Computers
mhm,
did real time. And that's what we have at our conference because of the scientific terminology. And
mhm,
so what we do is the speakers are asked to provide keywords via usually their PowerPoint. And then the captioners have those in advance so that they can put the scientific terminology in. So from that in that context, it's really quite helpful. But I actually agree with you. I like the speed of automatic captions that are just coming in just right after somebody speaks versus
mhm,
waiting for the captions to show up.
mhm.
Lexi, I was wondering during your presentation if there's some areas of your life where you wish there could be captioning, like different travel scenarios, just different situations you find yourself in where there isn't captioning available and it would be helpful.
My Spanish class 100%. You know, I've always had a problem with my previous Spanish class because Spanish is known for skipping syllables. So I, as a person who, really is reliant on syllables, hearing everything that I can, and the Spanish skips that, I didn't do that great with the speaking section and the hearing section just because Spanish is very difficult and it's a definitely more tonal based than I would say versus English. So I would definitely want that sort of, that device captioning to be able to, guide me towards that sort of, well, also it would help me with Spanish as a whole, but just help me with understanding the different tones, but also it's still pretty new. Spanish has various, different accents, and it can be, there's Cuban Spanish, there's Argentinian Spanish, there's just so much that's really hard with the stage that we're at now with technology to really get through everything. It's just going to take time to be able to expand on that technology.
Well, I wanted to give everyone a chance, kind of last call for questions. Um, Lexi, that was a very excellent presentation, and we appreciate your time and putting that together. And I know we look forward to, and the audience look forward to hearing you on a lot more topics related to how you're navigating hearing loss at this point. So we will send out a recording to everyone. We will send out the survey to everybody. But at this point, I think we'll say thank you so much for your time, everyone, and thank you so much to Lexi and to Donna. And say goodnight. Thank you so much.